the more meat you consume, the shorter your lifespan is one of the quotes coming out from Blue Zone's authorities. So if you hear stuff like that, here are some thoughts about staying focused on the big picture. I think it's important to emphasize this these days with so much controversy, confusion, and infighting in the progressive health scene about the nuances of how to pursue longevity and vitality. And this is prompted by a listener asking me recently what I thought about the quote resets, things like fasting, the ketogenic diet, hormetic stressors like cold plunging red light therapy, the vegan propaganda of doing a reset or a cleanse by consuming only brown rice and celery juice for 14 days or what have you. And so my response is like, we need to all take a step back and focus on the big picture. And one thing that's really important is to never get frustrated with your progress or with the confusion that might arise when you're listening to all kinds of different voices. You're doing the best you can with the knowledge that you have, and there's always a chance for self-reflection and further improvement. So we want to definitely stay open-minded instead of dogmatic. That's been my mission throughout this entire journey of deep immersion into health, fitness, longevity, is once you think you know everything, you get challenged and realize that it's just another stepping stone on the way. So you really have to strive and work hard to be open-minded, because I think all of us humans here, we want certainty and we want black and white. That's kind of how we're wired, is to gain this sense of contentment and satisfaction that we know everything there is to know. It's just human nature, right? So it actually takes a concerted effort to maintain your open-mindedness and your ability to think critically. I just did a show about how I am now taking complete days off from exercise rather than thinking and believing that every single day when I get up, I'm going to do something toward my fitness because I'm such a fit guy and I'm so committed to my performance goals and all that. And now I'm, rethinking and recalibrating that because I have really narrow and lofty fitness goals that require longer periods of true rest and recovery, especially to rest my tendons and connective tissue and muscles that seem to linger with nagging injuries as I pursue my main goals of high jumping and sprinting. So, always open-minded, changing and evolving my fitness programming at all times. And basically, that's been the story since way back in the triathlon days, where we'd spend hours talking through the latest, greatest information, the things that other athletes were doing, the things that science was coming forth, and then trying to reason with it and then put it into play. And so that kind of is the other part of maintaining an open mind, thinking critically, and then really focusing and prioritizing self-experimentation. So I think a lot of people get tripped up in the intellectual process of studying, evaluating information, listening to different points of view, reading excellent books and forming conclusions, and then forgetting to actually deploy it and individualize and personalize all these conclusions that we want to make about what's the right thing to do. So I think now that we're in the age of individualization and customization, the companies that I talk about, like Wild Health, where they do personalized health consulting from your blood results and your genetic testing rather than blanket recommendations for all humans. I think that's a great step forward, but that requires a lot of buy-in and responsibility from you to track your performance, create whatever metrics that you need that you think are valuable. Blood test is one idea. And then also, if you have peak performance goals like I do, I'm writing down my racing times in the track meet. That's pretty quantifiable right there. And if I'm getting faster and doing better, that's great. And if I'm not, I need to go back to the drawing board and figure out what's going on and what I can do differently. So really emphasize self-experimentation, and also realize that you don't know You don't have, outside reference points to determine whether you are right now at level 5 at trying to get to level 7, or whether you're at level 7 trying to get to level 9. There's always potential for self improvement and getting more health, more energy, more vitality, more peak performance. But sometimes we get lulled into thinking that things are going, quote, fine or whatever because we're looking around and immersed in truly the fattest, sickest, least fit population in recorded history, in the history of the human race. We are absolutely at our very worst right now when you're looking at the statistics like the rate of type 2 diabetes and obesity and metabolic disease and cancer, despite all the medical advancements and all the billions and trillions of dollars spent on trying to get humans healthy and avoiding disease. We are kicking ass now and breaking records. One of the most sobering and profound ones is that the offspring of today's adults, so my kids, have a lower life expectancy than I do for the first time in the history of civilization. And just to clarify that, because we get a lot of pot shots about honoring the ancestral health example, and then a someone unfamiliar will say something like, "Well, wait, if you're talking about what we did as hunter-gatherer caveman people, didn't those people only live to be like 30 years old?" And the answer is yes. And because we have those life expectancy statistics from pre-civilized ancestors 50,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, we have good data from the archaeological record. And the primal human had a life expectancy of like around 33. That's 10,000 years ago. But that stat was colored by a very high rate of infant mortality and a high rate of death by accident, misfortune, including starvation, predator danger, and all those primal things that have largely been eliminated from the stats of modern life. But here's the interesting thing that a lot of people aren't aware of. We talk about this in detail in the Primal Blueprint book, that when civilization started around 10,000 years ago, human life expectancy took a steady decline downward from around 33 in our hunter-gatherer ancestral times. It went down, not up, but down through things like the Roman Empire, where sanitation, living in close quarters, disease, warfare, these were the things that trashed life expectancy. And it actually reached a low of 18 years old. I think this was around the 0 year, or maybe 1,000 years before that. But somewhere was our very bottom, and that was a shocker to most people. It steadily climbed, or gradually climbed back up from the all-time low of 18. Imagine that human life expectancy was only 18, to gently, gently climb up over the centuries, until uh, the 20th century was when we finally and only did catch and pass our primal ancestors at age 33. Now, that's really still terrible life expectancy. Then we had an amazing breakthrough around 100 years ago with the discovery of hygiene, antibiotics, and modern medicine. So until the time of, let's see, would probably be your grandfather or great grandfather's time, human life expectancy was still very low because people got sick, and then maybe the witch doctor came over and tried to bloodlet them or whatever in the 18s and the 17s, and even into the early 20th century, we still didn't know how to take care of people. They got sick from the global pandemics that wiped out a massive percentage of the global population until we came up with vaccines and so forth. So only around 100 years ago did the graph of human life expectancy shoot upward in short order to where it was maybe 33 at the turn of the century, 1900, and then, 20, 30 years later, now it's up 50, 60, 70, and climbing until We generally have settled on, depending on the country, late 70s or even early 80s with the top nations. And by the way, the good old USA, number one in the Olympics with our gold medals and our total medal count, where we rank on the global life expectancy chart. Well, where do you think we should rank? Number one, right? Or number two or number four because of all the resources and affluence that we have in this country. But we're actually like number 35. Oh God, how embarrassing. Absolutely shocking. Down there with much less developed nations with fewer medical resources and overall level of societal affluence, things that really strongly affect life expectancy. So we pretty much suck on that level, even though we're number one in all the categories of modern technology advancements, medical advancements. So anyway, that was my aside about human life expectancy. And back to the content here. Um, let's really be careful as we aspire to focus on the big picture of not getting involved in trafficking in the dogma and the misinformation. So when in doubt, engage in self-experimentation rather than hitching your wagon even to some of the most prominent and highly respected health resources. One of them I'm going to pick on now is the blue zones. There's so much great information coming out of the blue zones research. Started as a book, became like a lifestyle movement. You've seen their documentaries and a string of best-selling books by the author. And Dan Buettner, the author, says that the plant-based diet is really a strong driver of the longevity that we've identified in these blue zones pockets. And that has been savagely attacked with great skill by people in the know, including Dr. Paul Saladino, who outright calls it propaganda. And he even has a quote from the author himself saying that regarding the plant-based diet aspect of the blue zones lifestyle habits and behaviors, he said they chose to highlight that aspect rather than actually going on the data. And Saladino offers a great counter argument that meat is a central element of the blue zone diet in every area except for the Seventh-day Adventists in Loma Linda. And these are all kind of minor elements, whether they're how plant-based they are and how meat-based they are, is not really relevant to life expectancy. The um, the country with number one life expectancy today is Hong Kong. They also have the highest per capita meat consumption, and so they're number one in life expectancy and number one in meat consumption. So that's a quick, snide quip here to counter the amazing propaganda that's putting out. These disastrous quotes that you hear like the more meat you consume, the shorter your lifespan is one of the quotes coming out from Blue Zone's authorities. So if you hear stuff like that, you can turn and run screaming in the other direction. You can reference the example of human evolution over the past 2.5 million years, where we evolved to the top of the food chain by gaining access to the most nutrient-dense foods on Earth, which are from the animal kingdom, not the plant kingdom. And that's not, I mean, it's an opinion. It might sound like an opinion, but it's also validated under a microscope. And you can Google kale versus liver and see a micronutrient breakdown of the what's contained in those two superfoods. Kale is the champion of the plant-based community as the superfood of the planet, where liver, the carnivores and the animal-based people are touting that as the most nutritious food. And there's no contest from a micronutrient perspective. So when you consume a slice of liver, you're getting vastly more nutrient density than you are in your kale salad. And that's not to be disputed or argued out of by a plant-based enthusiast. And here's another disturbing quote from Buettner talking to major news outlets. There's 5 pillars of every blue zone diet: whole grains, greens, tuberous food, nuts, and beans. The most important one is beans. A cup of beans a day could add 2 to 3 years to your life, end quote. amazing that people can say that, and they can probably point to their own research and show that the blue zones folks consume a lot of beans and they live longer than some other comparison group. But to pull that insight out of context and try to apply it to your own life, that's when we run into trouble, and we need to backpedal, 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 and look at the big picture. They're choosing to highlight such an aspect for their own I mean, high-minded ideals here that they want people to get healthy and they want people to get away from junk food and processed food, but they're doing it in such a way that could be highly objectionable when you're trying to look at real science and, for example, look under the microscope and look at the slice of liver versus the kale salad. Now, there's also the great research that's emanating out of there, where the true and driving reasons for their longevity and their happiness and their contentment. Buettner says they're driven by a life of meaning and purpose. They're investing in family, keeping their minds engaged, and there's no existential stress of being worthless in life like so many people in modern society. The option to being lonely shaves 8 years off of life expectancy here in the United States, but that does not exist in the blue zones. Further quotes from Buettner: walking is one of the best forms of exercise, and you can do it without thinking about it. He encourages people to rely less on cars and more on public transportation. Adopting a dog is really the best blue zone strategy there is, end quote. It's the perfect nudge to get you walking every day. And even the blue zones has a power 9 list of lifestyle attributes that promote longevity. And a life of movement is right up there at number one. They also have the social connections and that simplified life instead of choosing into the rat race and consumerism ideals. And they highlight those wonderfully. They just pollute their message with propaganda when it comes to following a plant-based diet. However, to give them a break here, when you're following a plant-based diet, that implies that you are eliminating the nasty, chemical-laden, nutrient-deficient processed foods that are killing humans before their time. So if Buettner is going to go on NBC News and say there's 5 pillars of the Blue Zone diet: grains, greens, tubers, nuts, and beans, people are not going to die from emphasizing those 5 foods, right? He conveniently leaves out, and can be intensely criticized for this, the naturally raised goats that the Sardinians consume in abundance, or the fresh eggs from the farm, and the other things that we see that give nutrient density and overall health benefits when uh, people consume the best sourced animal-based foods. Here's a plug for my Carnivore Scores food rankings chart that you can download from bradkearns.com, and it has a tiered ranking system of the world's most nutrient-dense foods. You can print it out, put it on your fridge, and realize that your first step into this conversation is to simply clean up your act and quit eating this poisonous, toxic food that the major food providers are shoving down our throats and sticking on billboards, advertisements, and throughout the grocery store, and just get simple and choose the natural, nutritious foods of the earth. If you want to go plant-based and emphasize those, sorry, I should have them memorized, the whole grains, greens, tuberous foods, nuts, and beans, you're probably going to have a wonderful health awakening heading down that path. And then if you can find your way to some responsibly sourced animal-based high-protein foods, and now we have strong support and encouragement that protein is the number one priority in the diet. And the best protein, of course, is animal-based. So if you can prioritize protein, clean up the processed foods, staying away from the sugary sweetened beverages that we find at Starbucks or wherever at the mini mart, those are the things that are trashing health, and that's going to be um, vastly more significant than pointing toward whole grains, greens, tubes, nuts, and beans for a magical health awakening, and having a cup of beans a day, adding 2 to 3 years of your life. And boy, what about staying connected with family, friends, social, and being on the move? Loneliness takes 8 years of life expectancy off. And so that's what I'm talking about here with the big picture. I want to give you both sides, lest you pass by a headline quote saying a cup of beans a day can add 2 to 3 years of your life. I'd rather say ditching all the things that you have in a frozen packaged box foods will definitely add more years to your life. Okay, so the discussion point to even talk anything about diet is to clean up your act, get rid of the nutrient deficient processed foods, and then try to source the natural nutrient dense foods of the earth. Of course, it's going to be according to personal preference, but again, protein is the top dietary priority, and many experts are now in agreement today that you want to shoot for a robust daily average consumption of protein somewhere around 1 gram per pound of your uh, goal ideal body weight. So if you are overweight by 10, 20, 30 pounds, you can subtract that and go for 170 grams of protein a day. But for someone on a plant-based diet or someone on a restrictive type diet where you're engaging in fasting, time restricted feeding, and then trending toward plant-based, and that includes a huge segment of the most health conscious people and the most diet conscious people in the population. They're doing things like fasting. They're doing things like emphasizing plant-based and making an effort to, you know, minimize things that we've been told are bad for us, like red meat, which is probably the best meat you can eat and vastly superior to white meat like chicken and pork. But anyway, if you can find your way to some good animal-based protein as the centerpiece of your diet, and then, of course, all the fresh foods, including those mentioned by the Blue Zones author, you're probably going to be looking really good. But we can't even talk about any details there until you clean out the junk food. Okay. What about the fasting, time-restricted feeding, and calorie restriction in pursuit of longevity? And yes, there's some really smart, high-profile guys that are telling you just that if you can, tighten up your caloric intake, you're going to live longer. There's a lot of dispute in this game. I'm landing firmly in the camp of perform and recover. That's my motto for longevity. And thereby, when fitness is prioritized, because fitness is the single best longevity intervention ever discovered, nothing else even comes close. That's a paraphrase quote from Dr. Peter Attia in his best-selling book, Outlive. So fitness is number one. I'm going to do everything I can to fuel myself for a life of performance and recovery and maintaining cardiovascular fitness and muscle strength and muscle power throughout my life. That means I'm going to think twice about engaging in deliberate fasting, calorie restriction, or macronutrient restriction in the name of triggering a health benefit. Mike Mutzel, who's got the great YouTube channel, High Intensity Health, he cites the really eye-opening research that the great benefits derived by fasting for autophagy, that's the natural cellular internal detoxification process. So autophagy is really important to anti-aging, longevity, and disease prevention. The benefits accrue in a massive manner after 48 hours of fasting. You get of course, good autophagy benefits even if you fast for 12 hours or 16 hours or 20 hours. But boy, when you get to that 48-hour fast, you get an amazing validated benefit in autophagy. And then here comes the punchline. He says research reveals that you get a similar boost in autophagy, immune function, anti-inflammatory, all those things from pushing yourself for a hard hour workout in the gym. And then which would you prefer? Starving yourself for 48 hours or going and slamming a hard hour-long workout in the gym for a very similar benefit to autophagy cell repair. These are called redundant pathways. That is, you derive the same health benefit from doing disparate behaviors. Another example is therapeutic cold exposure, or again, a high intensity workout. You get the same hormetic response where you're doing a brief and desirable stimulation of the fight or flight response, and consequently, you're getting a boost in uh, inflammation control, immune function, um, cell repair, all these great things that happen in the ensuing hours after you cold plunge or the ensuing hours after you sprint workout. So if you're deep into the biohacking scene, we want to make sure that you don't go overboard because it can get a little out of hand. And we want to reflect and realize, again, big picture, the theme of the show, that you are pursuing redundant pathways for the same health boost. So you don't want to overdo your biohacking to the extent that you overstress the body. Because remember, everything biohackers are doing is layered on top of a chronically stressful modern life. So you're stressed already when you're dealing with your mean ass boyfriend or your lousy boss, and then you're going to go jump in a cold tub, and then you're going to go do a sprint workout, and then the next day you're going to get up and you're going to jog an easy 5 miles because you want to balance your training. And these things, if you are taking notes, those all count as stressors. I did a great show with Scott Chiavery, the founder of Mito Red Light. He talked about that a 10-minute session in front of his very powerful red light panels is the optimal duration, and more is not better, because even red light exposure, where you're getting the exposure to the beneficial wavelengths of ultraviolet light, is a stressor, and the body responds by improving mitochondrial function after the stressor. So if you do a 2-hour red light session, that is going to put you possibly in the category of an overly stressful experience, just like getting too much sun and getting sunburn is beyond the optimal health response and into chronically stressful response. So that's also, I think, an important thing to consider when we're talking about getting too extreme with biohacking and dabbling in the prescription drugs in the name of an overall health or longevity benefit. So personally, I am never going to take anything uh, in the category of prescription drugs, which influence gene expression, right? That's kind of how the difference between a drug and like a supplement is that the drugs override your natural genetic switches to achieve a desired benefit, whatever it is, if it's anti-inflammatory or what have you, antibiotic, whatever. So I'm not going to take a prescription drug unless I have an acute problem or a huge high risk that's identified. And I'm going to take it as a strategy to heal with the idea that I'm going off that prescription drug as soon as I finish the recommended course of antibiotics or whatever drug we're talking about. Even painkillers, you have a surgery, you need to heal. I made this mistake myself where I wanted to be Mr. Badass, and I said, I don't need any of those painkillers. I'm just going to ride this thing out after my wisdom teeth are pulled or after my appendix has been removed. And I got myself into trouble because I ignored the common advice from the nurses and the physicians saying, stay ahead of the pain. I'm like, what do you mean stay ahead of the pain? What does that mean? It means take your prescribed agent on schedule so that the pain doesn't set in and become overwhelming. So I figured out the hard way that if you don't take any pain medications after your appendix is removed, after it bursts and you have emergency surgery, you're going to be hurting later that night to the extent that you're moaning and groaning and pushing the nurse button over and over because you think you're going to die. So great plug here at the end of the show for my new sponsor, Prescription Drugs Incorporated, when you need them, and also a incredible warning, emphatic warning that we do not want to have these things as, ideally, don't want to have them as a long-term component of our lifestyle when there's a possibility of engaging in lifestyle intervention to wean yourself away from the need for those drugs. So again, I'm not dispensing any medical advice on the show, nor am I countering anything that a doctor has said or prescribed to you. It's just the idea, and again, the big picture, that is there a possibility of lifestyle intervention such that I can wean myself off the need for these prescription drugs? That is my position on that subject. Okay, so we talked about diet. The starting point is cleaning up your act, and then with fitness, I want to emphasize that that big picture perspective of performing and recovering and putting fitness as the top priority for longevity in your life. And that means that you need to strategize to do everything you can do to be ready to perform and recover. That goes to the nutritious diet, that goes to not overdoing the biohacking, and of course, prioritizing sleep so that you feel rested and energized enough to make progress with your fitness goals. Okay, there you go. Love to hear your thoughts, feedback. Please email podcast@bradventures.com. Maybe you'll share this show with someone that you think deserves to hear it. And I love connecting with people that way. So thanks for making that effort to spread the word and listening, watching. I appreciate your support so much. We all do, working hard here to put out good content at the B.rad podcast. Talk to you soon.